All right, my name's Atkinson, for those of you watching at home and don't know me. I'm a member of the FRSO, SDS, RSU, although for the purposes of this presentation, I'm not speaking in capacity for any of those groups necessarily. A lot of this are kind of my own thoughts and ideas about building a student movement. So moving on to that, this is a presentation about building a student movement. And I realize the kind of inherent absurdity and irony of lecturing to a bunch of student organizers about building a student movement. So a lot of this presentation is going to just be kind of some thoughts and ideas I had about why we should organize students, especially since there always tend to be kind of some criticisms of students as a whole, as a class, as being kind of petty bourgeois. I kind of want to go over some points I had on that maybe we can hopefully discuss. Some kind of historic victories the student movement has had, especially here in America, fighting U.S. imperialism, which of course is a goal we can all agree on, and that's great. Then I have a quote from Mao, because of course I do. Then, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So, first things first. Students, what do we know about them? A lot of people have criticisms that student movements are inherently petty bourgeois, right? Universities are for the petty bourgeois. They're white dudes like me who shell out ungodly sums of money for the privilege of having somebody tell them to read a book. That, of course, is kind of a way of glossing over and not critically analyzing the place that students hold in, especially in American society, and this kind of interesting crossroads they're at of entering into the workforce. Now, yet another criticism is that a lot of students are basically getting trained as members of the petty bourgeois to go on to serve the ruling class, which is hard to argue, especially if you go to an Ivy League school like I do. Don't tell anybody. There's business majors absolutely everywhere discussing economics and how to make profits. And yes, please, Greg.
What do you mean by petty bourgeois?
Petty bourgeois, essentially that they're little capitalists. They don't own necessarily the means of production, but that they're not part of the working class. They basically serve under the capitalists, many of which with the aims and intents of becoming part of the ruling capitalist class. Anybody want to add anything to that definition, petty bourgeois? Chris?
I mean, there's a class analysis which, right, if you think about it, it's a set of people who have a certain relationship to the means of production.
Absolutely.
In a Marxist sense. But as an attitude, do you think there's anything to add to it? Because not everybody who actually owns a small business fits under that category, right? It's a sort of ideology, if you will, or an outcome life.
So the brother raises a good question, for those of you at home that couldn't hear him, that there is a class analysis aspect of this, which is kind of what I'm trying to get at. That necessarily everybody who owns a small business, we could say is petty bourgeois because of their relationship to the means of production, but also there's an ideological component that relates to whether or not they're aspiring to be a part of the capitalist class, or whether or not they're comfortable with their position, or whether or not they identify as part of the working class, or throw in their interests with that of the working class or the capitalists. And that's important to understand with students. Again, I'm talking to a room full of you, students, grad students, other people related to student work. I mean, obviously we're here because we're not interested in joining the capitalist class. I'm guessing none of us were business majors. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, oh, I thought you were philosophy.
I pursued a master's in business administration.
Okay, so we had one, which is funny given the circumstances.
Can I just...
Please. Yeah, please.
I wanted to combine American-like business professionalism with Russian revolutionary scope. It wasn't that I wanted to manage Walmart. Okay? So, just saying. No,
we'll give you a pat. I mean, you're here now. Again, right? It's like we're here now, so obviously not all students, right? Not all, whatever. At least I got some reaction out of that.
Can you reiterate that I groaned pretty loud?
The brother would like me to reiterate, for those of you at home, that he groaned very loudly when I said not all students. There was 2 groans. And this is where we come in, right? For a lot of us students who are working class, who have an interest in tearing down the capitalist class, whether that be, you know, our own vested class interest as poor motherfuckers breaking our backs for a living, or just as people who maybe went to college and took a, I don't know, sociology class about this kind of thing, and we're like, wow, the world's a fucked up place. This 1%, like, group of people owns 80% of the world's wealth, something like that. Maybe it's 85 now. I don't know, the world's fucked up. And then try to do something about it, right? This is where we can kind of come in and co-opt this kind of advanced section of the students and try to turn them into productive leaders of whatever movement, whether that's anti-imperialism, leaders in the workers' movement, oppressed nationality work, you know, all depending on their characteristics, what they're interested in, and what they want to do. There is a large potential for advanced peoples within the student movement, within the student body, even at a place like Westminster College where I go, where obviously the class characteristics would suggest that nobody's interested in overthrowing global capitalism. There are still large sections of advanced people who, even without communist or anarchist or any kind of anti-capitalist agitation, do a lot of very progressive work. And that's why we should kind of come in and build around them in order to turn that into more productive blows against U.S. imperialism. Does anybody have anything they would like to add to that? Questions, criticisms, comments, funny jokes, more groans? All right. This dovetails nicely then into my next point that I wanted to bring up, is that students have been known opponents of imperialism since the 60s. Everybody's familiar with the SDS. I would guess a large part of that is because we're part of the new SDS, but the old SDS, which was founded in 1960, 61, anybody know? I think Port Huron statement was 1961. Don't quote me on that. They formed mostly out of an opposition to the American stance on the Cold War, right? They were students that saw what was going on in Vietnam, and as a bunch of 18-year-olds themselves who were facing the potential of having to be forced into another country to get shot at, and, or even worse, shoot at other people, they formed an opposition to the wars. They formed an opposition to what they saw was America essentially goading the Soviet Union into an arms race in order to justify a military-industrial complex. I'm not saying they were wrong. They did many very famous rallies, protests, student strikes, national student strikes against the Vietnam War. And another very famous example of this, even though it's not directly related to the SDS, would be Kent State, which became one of the, so it was, for those of you who don't know, let's back up a little bit. For those of you who don't know about Kent State, you should. Essentially, it was a large student demonstration at Kent State in Pennsylvania? Is it, or is it Ohio? It was Ohio. Kent State, which was in Ohio. A bunch of student demonstrators showed up. There was like 4 days of protests over the invasion of Cambodia by the U.S. military. Or I suppose it was only the proposed invasion of Cambodia at this point. Huge protests. National Guard gets called out. People start yelling. People are being chased with bayonets. One thing leads to another. A sergeant gives order to fire on this group of students. 4 students were shot dead, like immediately, and another 9 were critically wounded. The nation lost its shit. There were infamous photos of this, people crying, people holding other bloody people, the National Guard with their thumb up their ass, just like, oh, what did we do? And it essentially changed the public opinion of the war overnight. And it turned the entire U.S. against the war in Vietnam. I mean, a lot of them already were at this point, but it absolutely flipped the script just overnight. led to the largest student strike in American history. 4 million students just walked out. Universities across the nation were shut down. And President Nixon actually wrote in a letter that was like later found and published that he chose to withdraw from Cambodia and actually was considering ending the whole Vietnam War because of what happened at Kent State. That basically students had become so radicalized around the issue that he realized they weren't going to win anymore trying to get people for the draft or trying to gain public support for the war. So as gruesome of an example as that is, it shows how students actually can, through hard work and through organizing and through sacrifice, as the case is in this point, hopefully doesn't happen to any of us, they really can strike huge blows against U.S. imperialism. And it more or less brought the troops out of Vietnam, which I don't have to tell you was a huge victory for students, for the people of Vietnam, for the People's Republic of Vietnam, etc. Does anybody have any other, maybe a favorite student strike, a little brighter one, maybe another more positive? Greg?
I was wondering, what did students have to do, because you've mentioned the 60s, what did students have to do with the civil rights organizing?
That's another great example. The brother asked what students did for civil rights organizing. You have examples like Freedom Summer, where tons of students volunteered to bus into the South, enlist people for voting registration. They took like a solid stance against Jim Crow laws, and in some cases, just these busloads of white students went and like got in the way of people who were trying to prevent black people from voting. They would do voting drives just to try to get black people registered, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with Jim Crow laws, was made almost virtually impossible. They would essentially give these like impossible tests to black people in an effort to get them to fail so they wouldn't be able to vote. And students from all across the nation bust down to do that. An even better example is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, of which Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a member and leader. If you haven't guessed, he did a lot for the civil rights movement. He was kind of a big deal in the whole civil rights movement thing. A lot of speeches. It was the Atlanta student movement that. Oh God, I'm trying to remember now. There's another big person. Bob Brown, member of the Black Panther Party. Stokely Carmichael was also a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee before he became a Black Panther. I'm trying to remember the woman's name. There was. Oh man, I feel really bad now. Moving on. Anybody else have any favorite examples of past student? Again.
Did students have anything to do with Chicanos in the 60s, or any actions like, say, walkouts?
Well, I'm afraid I can't speak to that one that well. Would you want to throw out a blurb?
Maybe Carlos Montes?
I'm familiar with Carlos Montes, yes. Organizing walkouts, Chicano students down in the Midwest. I guess not Midwest, Mountain West, Southwest, not quite the Mountain West. Yeah,
Southwest.
Yeah, LA's very west. I never know what to call this general region. Aztlan. You're absolutely right. Chicano students organizing in Aztlan during the 1960s also performed several walkouts, sit-ins. Samuel Jackson he was later, wasn't he?
No, he was a Black Panther.
Yeah, he was a Black Panther, but...
Who held his university...
Yeah, but I thought that was like 70s, like late 70s.
There was a lot of bleed over from 65 to 71, and I think it was 71 when Samuel L. Jackson actually held his university president hostage.
Right on. So for those of you who didn't hear that, 1971, right when Students for Democratic Society officially voted to disband and form the International Committee Against Racism, Samuel L. Jackson, in was it LA? It was in Oakland, excuse me. In Oakland, was a member of the Black Panther Party and actually took his university president hostage over demands during a protest. And now, because of that, he got threatened into acting school by the FBI and is now the actor in several of my favorite movies. Probably my favorite actor in every single one of those movies. So that's a more positive outcome, I think, of a lot of the student movements of the 60s, 70s. And that, I think we kind of already covered how students and oppressed nationality work overlaps quite a bit through a lot of student movements, like Education for All that we're fighting for right now. We're trying to fight for oppressed nationalities to enter colleges more easily. For a long time it was a white man's world. Still really kind of is a white man's world on the university level. And it's work that needs to be done. Students, especially students that are oppressed nationalities, do a lot of good work on that level. Anybody have any questions at this point? Comments? Before I start quoting Mao. All right, I'm just going to throw this one out here. It's a good one. He said that young people are the most active and vital force in society. They're the most eager to learn and the least conservative in thought. And I think a lot of us can agree with that. A lot of us that are on the student setting, I say us, I mean mostly everybody in this room. Being a student means being economically precarious. It means being very open to different schools of thought. It means being very critical of a lot of things, and kind of how all those things intersect leads to us really hating the people that are A, forcing us into business majors in order to make a living, B, then charging us a lot of money for that decision in order to make a living, and then C, when we can't afford that after we graduate, following us and knocking on our door and like moving where we move and digging through our trash cans trying to get money from us. Yeah, that being said, it's easy to see how students can be radicalized very easily, and that is our goal, to radicalize them and turn them into larger movements. Yeah. All these notes are just starting to sound the same in my head. Students fighting against imperialism. Chris?
So you mentioned a lot of issues that students take up, like
right.
imperialism or immigration or these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience as a student organizer, what are actual student issues that students are willing to organize around in their own interests?
In our own interests as students, the brother asked, so there's all these great anti-imperialist, pro-immigration, etc., different movements that students could organize around, but as for actual students themselves and their interests, I've organized, I guess it would have been most closely a free speech, let's call it that, a free speech protest on my campus that went over very well. That fought for the rights of students. Essentially, we had members of the student administration kicked out for no reason, even though members of the student senate voted to keep them intact, and the school basically said, we don't actually care what you think, we're just going to do this anyways. And then we protested around that, brought a lot of hell down on the administration, and that helped us gain a lot of traction on the student government setting as a voice for students, which all in all things considered, was a good campaign. Probably a more obvious one for a lot of people is tuition or student loans, fighting against those, trying to gain scholarships, win more scholarships and more funding from universities, trying to lessen tuition. I know every single year at Westminster there's like a petition or some kind of movement that goes around to try to get like to lower tuition over the next 4 years, or to try to establish a lock-in for students for the next 4 years, or to freeze tuition for a certain amount of time, because thus is the nature of capitalism. Every year they're going to try to see how much more they can squeeze out of us. It always costs more and more and more, and it gets ridiculous. organizing to keep a multicultural center, as the sister said, is another great student movement that has the student interest at heart. And yet another great example of how student movements and oppressed nationality work overlap a ton. Jake?
Well, what do you think, for instance, about the sort of groundswell of rights that have been won by people, and specifically students, for GLBTQ persons?
Yeah.
We have somebody here in the audience who actually organized in his high school.
Yeah.
You know, as a lot of people have at their high schools. And those people are now progressively getting older. And the places that are, you know, winning, for instance, bathrooms that everybody can use, you know, like transgender bathrooms and stuff like that. Those are things that are being won by students. Those aren't being won by legislation.
Yeah.
And even though adults who are not working have a lot to do with that, I would say that that's a huge part of the winning.
The brother points out that another great example of student movements that have been highly successful are organized around LGBTQ issues, and that a lot of it comes down to students who are very aware of the issue, and they're the ones that promote it the most and fight for it the hardest, and that a lot of these victories we've been seeing haven't been won necessarily by random good-to-do adults. It's been by students, and they've been led by students, and they've been huge student movements organized around those issues. The comrade gave examples about gender-neutral bathrooms. You had a couple other examples in there. I apologize, I forgot. Ian, excuse me, comrade. Maybe I shouldn't say your name on the internet. You operated a GSA, or you helped organize a GSA in your high school. Do you have any stories about that, what it was like organizing that?
Well, basically what we did is I got a group of students together who were just in my sociology class, and we formed a group called like Student Cooperation Network, something really kind of soft sounding. And then we were sitting around, we're like, well, what should we organize? Because we want to do something. And someone said, well, we don't have a GSA. And from that, we just, we organized it. I thought it was really cool. It was a good experience, and now those 6 students are still at the high school, and they're now organizing against something the LDS or some LDS person is doing in the area. I don't know. Apparently, someone just left a bunch of went to the parking lot and left a bunch of hate flyers on people's windows. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty good experience. And yeah, we ended up winning the GSA, and right now they're still around their lead campaign.
Right on. So you organized the GSA, which is already pretty awesome in and of itself, and apparently we're taking a sociology class in high school, which is awesome. I've never heard of that. Your high school must be very progressive. Just the one teacher. That makes more sense. Were there any other concrete victories you won that year, or with your experience in a GSA? Or?
Other than, no. I mean, not only did we have the GSA, this was something that I thought that I was pretty proud of myself for. We didn't have an 8-person GSA. It was regularly 40+ people meeting in the classroom for the GSA because of the conflict and because of the campaign we did leading against the principal.
That's awesome.
Who was denying us. And so I think that's not necessarily a concrete victory because it's not set in stone. It's not a new rule. Now, that's the campus attitude at high school. And yeah, I remember some parents were complaining because their son was homophobic and felt isolated at school. So, I thought I was promoting bullying of homophobic kids. Why not? Right, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
It's not I'm forced to be homophobic.
Yeah. You shouldn't bully anybody, but it's going to be somebody, maybe homophobic kids. I don't know. That's only in Utah. Only in Utah are parents afraid of their kid being bullied for being homophobic.
Discrimination.
Yeah. How dare they discriminate against my discrimination? What the fuck?
Somebody feel like there's a hostile place in high school, maybe, for the beliefs that they have, maybe.
Wait till they get to college and they'll really discover their homophobia, It's find people they can really communicate with. But no, I think even that in and of itself is a victory, and that's, I guess, kind of a point I'm trying to make is education is a great way to make people kind of aware of these issues and to get them radicalized and to get them active and motivated to take stands against this stuff. And even if you didn't, like you said, win anything concrete, like you didn't get a new law or a new rule or anything passed, still starting a GSA in a place like Utah at a public high school that regularly had like a huge attendance, like 40 plus people, that's awesome. And I mean, people like you came out of it and you do awesome work, so.
And furthermore, 12 of the people who were in there, like I would call, you could say the most advanced of them joined the SDN, and then the SDN unanimously voted to join the SDS, which they never got back to me. But I mean, if that shows anything else too.
Yeah.
That's where they are right now.
More people in the SDS, more better, so.
I'm actually talking to them right now.
Right on.
The right to have a GSA is something that's been won in the recent future here in Utah due to GSA activists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, I forgot my next point. Crap. Does anybody have any other good examples of student movements they've been involved in? I mean, obvious ones that like we're doing right now aside.
Divestment campaigns. I know a lot of universities in the past they played a big role in trying to move universities from any kind of investment in South Africa and with the apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
In the present, of course, you got a lot of universities that are being pressured to cut any kind of investment in Israel or with anything to do with fossil fuels. The universities, they got a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of endowments. They
yeah.
do hold some weight, and students are the ones who can push and pull and influence a university.
Yeah.
So.
I actually, I know some of the people that ran the Stanford divestment campaign, and Stanford just recently divested from Israel. So they're just popping champagne and running around in their underwear. It's been a good week for them. Graphic example, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I listened to too much Kanye. What?
I said too bad it was literal.
Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes when teachers are trying to organize, specifically people like adjuncts and stuff like that, students can be a huge part of winning that. Not necessarily as like a sort of national movement, but locally to colleges I know that, like for instance, there was several in Boston where the university was actually actively organizing against the unionization of adjuncts specifically, and it was the students that were able to push it through for them. Obviously, in addition to the work of adjuncts, but as we all know, they're quite busy.
Yeah. For those of you that didn't hear that at home, the brother raised a good example of adjuncts trying to unionize and how student solidarity is pretty critical to winning those movements as well, which end up being pretty huge deals for the adjuncts and other faculty and staff members especially. I know there's been talks of that around here lately about how screwed over adjuncts get at a lot of the universities and things we could do to help them. Of course, when you walk into the room and you're like, I don't know, maybe unionize, everybody just looks at you sideways. It's bad time. Yeah.
There's also Students United Against, United Students Against Sweatshops, who simultaneously organize workers on campus, whether they're food workers or janitorial workers, and then also organize against having sweatshop labor. The brother over there is wearing a Boston College hoodie, and most of that stuff that's made is not made in the United States. It's not made, not that I care if it's made in the United States, but it's not made under good conditions. The workers are not paid well. And so I know that many students in United Against Sweatshops have led campaigns to get those removed from campus and get fair wages for the people who make the campus clothes.
Yeah. The brother had a great example of United Students Against Sweatshops who routinely organize for campus unionizations and to win fair wages for people working on the campuses and people who keep the campuses running, which is important. It's hard to study in the dark and if you're hungry, and so the people that help you fix those problems should get fucking paid. Just saying. It's a problem at my school too. Is this the part where I flip the table? I feel like I'm running out of steam. Flip it, flip it, flip it, flip it. It's the part where I bench press Jake. Should I throw a chair at the window? All right. So, in case any of you at home are skipping right to the end of this video to see if it gets any good, I think the summation we should leave. I think the summation that we should end with is that student solidarity is important in a broad range of issues, including immigration, other oppressed nationality work, anti-imperialism, unionization of workers, and even better than that, sometimes just radicalizing students and getting them involved in other areas of work outside of being a student. Are you raising a hand, or are you just
finished with your summation? I actually just had a real quick question.
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely.
So given that being a student is usually like a 4 to 5 year commitment, it's not the rest of your life, what should students do after they graduate?
That's a great question. I was kind of leading in that direction. After students graduate, and this is kind of what I was saying, if you're like me and not exactly sure what you should do, or you're trying to give yourself a year off so your brain doesn't explode, there's tons of other great areas of work you can be involved in. Probably the best of them is taking your newfangled college skills and going and getting involved in union work in places all across the nation that really need it. I'm sure there's a place right next to you, your local Teamsters union. Anybody else got a good union that's good for college grads to join? IATSE, maybe? No? No, don't join IATSE. Maybe if you're good at math, you can become an electrical worker. I know they need those. And you get involved in a workers' movement and work for a union. Just do it. It's going to be the best pay you get anyways, degree or not, so. Yeah.
Stop working for the rest of your life.
Unless you organize the working class.
Yeah.
All your fancy college skills.
Yeah, use your fancy college skills to organize the working class. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Organize the working class. Go out, keep winning victories. Just give them hell. Yeah. All right. Jake.
Any personal advice on how to organize a campaign, a revolutionary group on, say, any one of these viewers' own campus or anything like that?
Yeah, for those of you who are watching who don't already have a good student group, like already organized, that you can lead campaigns with, a good way to get started is to pick an issue and find people that also give a shit about it, which if you're in a sociology class like me, is easy to do usually. If not, probably, I don't know, join a sociology class or an environmentalism class or something like that. I'm joking. Ian.
Are there any groups in particular you think would be good for students looking to organize to contact?
Yeah, groups in particular. If you have a local SDS chapter in your area, maybe at your own university or a university next to you, get in contact with them with organizing. If not, start your own damn SDS chapter and raise some hell on your own campus. Find people who are also interested in fighting for education for all or raising hell about the war. There's not really a draft, so you can't say no to the draft, but maybe just say like, US, get the fuck out of Iraq. Find other people and get organized, man. I'm trying to play. It's been a long fucking day for me. I'm sorry, Jake. Did that answer your question? Please feed me more so I can answer.
Sure, let's see. You were starting to raise your hand like you had something to contribute.
Do you have something to contribute?
Is there anyone nationally you could contact on how to start a student group?
I already said the SDS.
What's the website?
Is there a website?
There is an SDS website, and it's a good one. You should check it out. Check out the SDS website at sds.com. New SDS.
It's probably
I'm not going to say the WW crap.
turn around. Is it on the back of your shirt?
Is it on the back of it? Jake, can you zoom in? Is there a website on my shirt that we can read? Is it up here, maybe, somewhere that we can see?
There is no website.
There's no website? You're fucking joking.
NewSDS.org.
NewSDS.org, thank you.
Might be a good place.
You don't have to type in the W's. Nobody does that anymore. Just newsds.org.
People in the fucking Philippines are watching this like.
People in the Philippines, yeah. Just,
People in this room are watching.
oh, shit. Yeah, check out newsds.org. They have tons of great info that'll help you organize a chapter. You can also start an RSU if you want. Same diff, really. We're cool too. I'm just saying. Oh man, I'm dying up here. So it's yeah, Jake.
How would you go about, like, say, getting official funding or recognition by a school? I know, like, a lot of public universities will put out money for student groups.
So funding's an interesting issue. I know this exact group isn't necessarily funded for reasons. Not like bad reasons. The school's a bunch of asshats. At Westminster College, I can call the school asshats on the internet, right? I'm not going to get in trouble.
Why are you looking at me?
You would know?
Presentation.
All right.
Do whatever the fuck you want. Clearly are.
Yeah. I know at the Westminster RSU, we joined our school's interclub council, and they had kind of their own weird funding system that I imagine a lot of other universities have. Get in contact. There's usually a chair of clubs. I know we have a council. I think many other universities have some kind of club council or club senate where chairs can go and meet and discuss those things. So get in contact with that. I imagine there's somebody at the student office more than happy to help you with that. That will help you get funding on a per club basis. Yeah, Jake.
Oftentimes, it's a really good idea to register your club, even if you're not going to get any funding with the university and or college. The reason being is it's a lot harder to kick you off campus if you're a registered club there, and if you're just a bunch of random adults, and oftentimes student groups are comprised of people that aren't currently enrolled in college. They would have every justification, well, legally, not morally or ethically, or in a view of perspective, but they can just kick you off of campus.
Right.
I mean, they might even be able to do it if you have a club.
Yeah, they've done it to me.
I think it's a lot harder. Yeah, I mean, they can still do it. So that's the real advantage.
So for those of you that didn't hear that, Brother raises a point that you should definitely start with getting your club registered, if only to make sure that your campus can't kick you off the campus for tabling or for flyering or for doing any of that stuff. I also know my campus is particularly strict. Like, you need to be a registered club, and you need to then prove that you're a registered club so you can get shit like stamped and signed, so you can post flyers up. I know here it's a little less strict. You can but you still need to be like, yeah, we're with this club, and that's why we have this table here. Being a registered club, even if you don't get money, has a lot of benefits, such as access to like room reservations. I know on my campus, like, you need to be able to say, like, yeah, I need this room, and it's being held for this organization, and we're doing this. And if you don't have a club that the school recognizes, or some other kind of organization that the school recognizes, you're not going to get very far. So definitely, again, check with, it's different from university to university, but it's like an interclub council, a club affairs office. Does anybody know what it's called here on this campus? I think it's a clubs and organizations office. I think there's probably a person with a desk you have to go yell at. Yeah, start there, get registered. If you don't get funding, you don't need it. If you can't get funding, that's awesome. Milk it for all of it's worth. We've gotten trips to go places like national SDS conventions off of our school's funding, which is awesome, because we didn't have to pay for it. It's cool. Going from there, maybe attend the meetings you're supposed to attend as a club person. I never did at Westminster. I still got the money. It was great. I didn't have to go. That's where the money went. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Organizing and building a student movement? Cool. Pick an issue, get some friends, raise some hell on your campus about it. It can only end well. That's all I have to say. Cool.